start. Thank you for joining. I am David Aigbona, and I'll be joined by Fiona Ryan. We were speaking in the first part of this interview about eugenics, the situation in France and Europe, Europe's relations with the rest of the world, and the deliberate dumbing down of society. And for those of you who do not know her, she's quite popular on TikTok and on YouTube. She is a political activist, British political activist, and she has been instrumental in getting people politically conscious in the right way, getting them to know what is really going on in the world. And so, Fiona, thank you for joining. And
thanks for having me again, David.
You have to just summarize the previous part of the video for those who may be watching you for the first time on this platform, who didn't watch part one.
So I believe in the last video we spoke mostly about my vibe, which you've kind of touched on there, which is to try and get, you know, people that look like me to actually understand a bit more holistically what's really going on in the world. And you know, I do get kind of judged as being, you know, pro-Africa or pro-Russia or anti-West, and actually what I really want is for people to see the benefits to the changes that are going on for all of us. And I want to, in this program, talk a bit about the new currency that's just been put to us by BRICS. But first I wanted to go back to a conversation you and I had off screen, which was about in the last video we were talking about education, and we kind of got cut off by the time thing, and how you were talking to me about how education in Africa has really been used as a way of dumbing down Africa, to make Africans less aware of their power and how important they are. And that really resonated with me, because certainly here we are being it's almost like the effect is the same, but the reason is different. So we're kind of taught that we are this amazing, you know, colonizing, brilliant race that's gone around the world, and, you know, Great Britain, Britannia rules the waves, and all this nonsense, and it invariably has the same effect, in that people don't really understand our past or other people's experiences of who we are. And it does dumb down society. My son is 13 on Saturday, and he is a very keen political, you know, he loves anything political. He loves learning about things. And you know, he said to his history teacher, well, if I do history as a GCSE, which is their examination here, will we learn about the Cold War? And she said, no, we don't learn anything after World War II. Well, you know, World War II ended 76 years ago. You would think that it's time that we updated the curriculum to include some of the important things that have happened in the world since then, but we just don't. They learn the kings and queens of England. They learn a very brief description of places that we've gone and invaded, but in a kind of positive way. And so we never really get political people coming up who understand the changes that need to happen. And it made me think on a personal level about narcissism, and about what we call you get narcissism, and then you get a similar condition called borderline personality disorder, which kind of produce the same results, but they're based in different things. So people tend to have borderline personality disorder because they feel that they're not enough, and people have narcissistic personality disorder because they feel they're so important that the world should be adjusting to kind of meet them and their standards. And that really made me think about our conversation, and how similarly these two psychologies presents, but how the basis is different. And with Africa, I think that there is a far greater chance that African people, it's very easy to believe that you're better than you've always been told. So it's much easier to treat someone that's grown up thinking they're worthless, to teach them that they're worthwhile. It's much harder to teach people that they are less worthy than they have grown to believe and they've been taught to believe by their environment. And I think that's the battle that you and I and our brothers and sisters have in society now, because whether we like it or not, there is going to have to be a massive change to the educational structure of both of our societies. For the West, we are going to have to learn to moderate ourselves, tolerance and understanding about why we haven't necessarily been welcomed with open arms. I mean, the amount of white nationalist type people, royalist people who were gobsmacked that Prince Charles, or now King Charles, wasn't welcome with open arms in Africa and India. And, you know, I think they had to cut the last royal tour short because of people basically just throwing things at the royals, because that whole kind of blanket love for the royal family of Britain has ended in a number of countries around the world. And it was a huge wake-up call for a number of British people, because we're like, well, we built some railways, why don't they love us? We have to learn that now. Whereas I think for Africa's got a similar journey to go on, where you need to change your education system so that African children understand the incredible benefits and the great things that Africans have produced and created. And was it you who was telling me that Facebook actually had to go to Africa and hire people?
Yeah, in Lagos, the economic capital of Nigeria, not the political capital, the economic capital, Lagos. Mark Zuckerberg was here a few years ago to meet up with some Nigerians to help improve Facebook. No details were given for what those guys were to do, but he signed multi-million-dollar deals with these Nigerians. One thing that we should know is, if you want to give a person a new identity, you make him unaware or forget his history. And when the British came to the Benin Kingdom, it's a part of Nigeria, it was an ancient kingdom, Benin Kingdom. They saw a pyramid in the Benin Kingdom, and they destroyed that pyramid. They didn't want the following generations of the Beninese to know where they actually migrated from, because according to the history of the Beninese, they were Egyptians who migrated down to sub-Saharan Africa. And so they established a thriving kingdom that had even a moat surrounding the city for defense. It was like it was a moat, a deep thing around the city. The British were amazed to find it. It took them some time to defeat the Oba. That's the tribal name for king. Oba is the same thing as king in English. It took them some time to defeat the Oba. And they came in a tricky way. They came in as traders and then did some other stuff. So my generation didn't even know the history of that tribe until I did some research and I saw, okay, this is where this tribe came. And the tribe I am from, Etsako, migrated out of the Beninese to another part of Nigeria. So we're able to connect the dots. The education system creates a case of superiority complex, inferiority complex. And in that way, there is guaranteed to be a clash. There's going to be a clash, because Now, the migrant crisis, we're going to get to that and we'll say some things about it. Because now, the education system in Nigeria was deliberately directed to fail.
Yeah.
Such that first, the curriculum was outdated. And then, when people were still going with the curriculum, certain forces in government started instigating strike actions in the government universities, which moved a lot of people to travel back to the UK, or rather travel to the UK for higher education. And such, it had its negative effect on the education sector in Nigeria. It has been dying until private universities started coming up and people now go to the private universities. But once again, the UK just did like a boomerang. They went in, when they were leaving, they made sure that there will be chaos in government and certain things. And then money is coming back to the UK through these foreign students. So that being said, this is one thing that is causing crisis in France, migrant issues. You have people coming in for education and so
well, just quickly before we move on to that, on education, I just want to point out that there's been a huge movement recently in the last 10-15 years to make people more aware of women's input into the sciences. And that's been across the board. There's been a number of films relating to, for example, I'm trying to stop my dog from snoring on your so go over there, doggy. There's been a number of videos related to women who were massively instrumental in some of the developments of NASA, in some of the mathematical equations that were needed to be understood in order for certain procedures to work. And I think that we need to have a similar movement when it comes to understanding the use of foreign minds to make, if you like, the vision of white people kind of come to reality. Because a lot of the scientific experiments and theories that we take for granted as being related to old white men have actually come from their travels and people that they've met along the way that are from different cultures.
Yes, we're aware that there were inputs from Africa in the aspect, in the area of technology. And exactly. I mentioned in a previous video that the man that made the Microsoft computer system work faster is actually a Nigerian. He's from the eastern part of Nigeria. And he was
so we need to have a similar movement in the way that we have with feminism that actually opens people's minds to this. But I do think it's blocked by, again, what we were talking about in the previous video, by this concept of racism and xenophobia being weaponized in a way that prevents people from really being able to understand that there are differences between the races. There are differences in the way that minds work. There are differences in the cultural understandings that we have related to things like numbers, science, the way we choose to look at the world. And instead of being able to embrace those, we instead allow ourselves to be weaponized against
each other,
against seeing them.
It's just like I have had encounters with people who are Europeans, and I'm amazed at how little they know about Africa.
Yeah.
Yes.
Most Europeans think Africa is a country. Not many countries.
Not many countries. And there are 55 countries in Africa. Africa is larger than Europe, several times larger than Europe. In Africa,
and even our maps are skewed, so you can't see that. It's
even in Africa, we have different races. We have the Arabs, we have Black Africans, we have those that are in between, and we have had empires, the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the Benis, the Hausa Fulani, the Zulus, everyone with their own culture. And
yeah, and that's why I get so annoyed. Like, there was this big move with films to have, you know, every film's got to have a black, gay, non-binary character in it. You know, that's the kind of vibe now. And I'm like, they even released a period drama about Queen Anne, a famous British monarch, and Queen Anne was played by a black woman. Now, that's ludicrous, because there is no way a black person in the royal family would be able to get to that level even now. But also, I don't want to see a inclusive society that says, oh, black people are good enough to play white people. I want to see an inclusive society where we have period dramas that are explaining the incredible stories that you can hear from African tribes. You know, I want to hear about the battles. I want to hear about African culture shown by African people. And there's so much, not just room for that, but there's also so much appetite for it. You know, we live in a culture now in the West where everybody's watching films all the time. You get home from work, you put the telly on, you're fed information. So now would be the perfect time to actually give people those stories that they don't know. And instead of exploring them, we're watching a remake of an old white story that happens to have a black person crowbarred into it. And I'm like, to me, that's more insulting to black culture than it is accepting of it, you know?
Yeah. The aim of these people behind Hollywood, behind all this inclusiveness, is actually to fragment the society. And so when they ask a black person to play Queen Anne, it's going to annoy the whites, and it's going to make the blacks actually feel insulted also, because it's like the impression is, oh, you feel you are helping us by making a funny story out of us. You see, we have differences. Each race has its uniqueness. But we have
and incredible stories. That's the thing.
There are lots of stories that are not told.
The seriousness of it. It's like, these are stories that I want to hear. I don't just want to hear stories about white monarchs that happen to have a black person in. I want to hear those incredible stories about African warriors, and, you know.
Yeah, let me tell you something that happened. There was a monarch in Nigeria, a monarch of a large tribe, and he was abroad. I think he was in the US for an engagement, and he happened to be speaking with someone in the education sector, and the person was telling him a story of a tribe that was now extinct. This is a university lecturer telling this man, oh, there was this tribe, they are now extinct, and all those stuff. And he was telling about this monarch's tribe.
Wow.
And the monarch was the one telling the story here in Nigeria, and he looked at the man and was like,
do I look extinct?
Re-educated again, and told the man who he was, and then showed the man the history and said, okay, let's go to the library in the university or the museum. They went there, and they had pictures of this monarch's ancestors. And he began to name them and tell this man the stories about these people. And the man was surprised. He had been teaching his students that tribe was extinct. And the tribe is one of the major tribes in Nigeria. So the monarch was invited to give a lecture to open the people's minds.
That's the right response, though, isn't it? And right response.
Yes, right response. So now you had people being, how many Europeans are taught that Africans still have to, they hang on the trees, they jump from one bush to the other, which is not true. We're in Africa, we have a sizable European population. In Nigeria, for example, where I am, the federal capital of Abuja, the British embassy is a massive complex. The American embassy is like a university campus. Wow. Lots of Americans there, yeah, very massive. And the Americans are living fine. They go to parties. They eat our food. They drive on the streets. Some of them have been here for many years, but a lot of people outside don't know this. And so it's causing this clash. When Africans are in Europe, they experience racism. When the Europeans come over here, they have a cultural shock. And if people could be open-minded when relating with the Asians, with the Europeans, with the Americans, everybody, open-minded to learn, not to teach.
Yeah.
Because the Western
I think
culture,
that's a real key.
Yeah.
That's a real key, is that
it's different from what I can cope with. Quite frankly.
That we need to learn, not teach. And that's huge, I think. But I think that media, and getting back to what you asked about how we prevent the dumbing down of society, I think media is so important, because in media you have access to a lot of people. You have access to different a lot of money, and actually we can use that to help people to understand the differences between cultures, and actually move it further away from this kind of crowbarring of people into. I think a lot of it comes from America, and I was really, really heartwarmed to see a number of African women speaking to American Black women about culture. And they said, how dare you tell people they can't have braids in their hair? How dare you tell people that they can't wear African earrings? Whenever I've traveled, I've picked up pieces of cloth or bought saris or bought earrings from various different tribes and cultures, and worn them proudly to show my love for that tribal culture and that experience that I've had with them. Whereas now, if a white person is to put on a pair of earrings, it might be cultural appropriation, and we get told off by Black people, mostly Americans.
Mostly Americans.
And it's
sorry, let me just interject on that. This happens not on African soil.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what these African women were saying. They were saying, how dare you use our culture to attack people that just want to experience culture? And it reminds me of something we get here in Britain a lot, is we get these Americans come over and they say, oh, I'm Scottish, and I'm like, well, you don't look or sound Scottish. Oh, my great-great-grandfather was Scottish, so I'm Scottish. And, they're there in almost a cosplay of, kilts and bells and stuff. And I say to them, do you know what? I was born in Scotland. I was born in Inverness in 1984, and I am not Scottish. So if I was born in Scotland, but I'm not Scottish, how on earth are you Scottish when you've never set foot in Scotland? And do you know what I mean? It's not a cosplay that you can put on. But I think that this is what happens when you get these British colonial mindset. They're desperately trying to find a culture. And with Black Americans, because they don't know where they're from, they don't know what part of Africa they're from. The only connection that they have to Africa is their skin color, and they're desperate to own some part of culture that isn't just slavery, And I think that that's what it does, and it creates this kind of weaponizing of culture, when really we should be at a stage where we can embrace culture and understand it,
Because the Black, for example, the Black Americans, they get their idea of what Africa is from the colonial discourse. And so they don't understand how Africans live in Africa.
And I try to explain to them, like, the very act of saying somebody can't wear something because they're white is purity, is a Puritan mindset, is purist. The Puritans are the ones that went and colonized America. So when they use this ideology to promote this cultural appropriation, they are actually pushing a very white man purist ideology. It's nothing to do with Africa. Because whenever I've actually met African people, and when I mean, I've not actually managed to travel to Africa, but I traveled Asia, India, you know, and people are more than happy to share their culture with you. And when I've met African people here, they're like, yeah, we want people to enjoy things that are related to Africa, not be scared of them. That really, really moves us away from the point, you know.
Yeah, in Africa, people, Europeans, whites, they dress like us. They wear our clothes. They actually, we see them just like us. There's nothing there. They wear our shoes, wear our clothes, they eat our food, and everybody gets along. In fact, Europeans and Africans get along much better on African soil than on European soil. Yeah.
And I think that that's often because of like what we were talking about, and you put it so well with the kind of superior inferior thing. I think a lot of Africans will have been taught that Europeans are deeply superior to them, and Europeans will be taught the same thing. And that's really the barrier that we have to break. And I think it will be easier for Africans to do that because they are basically learning that they're awesome, you know, whereas white people have to learn that we aren't as awesome as we've always believed. And that's a much harder process. But I think that that is why it was so convenient and quick for the French to jump to, this is a black man problem, this is a race problem when it came to the riots, because that's essentially what they've been taught. These are barbaric people that have, you know, they can't do anything but riot, you know. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, the white guys were rioting last month. I mean, like, is this not a problem with France rather than a problem with race, you know?
With race, yes. And let me show you something. The Europeans do have even entertainment collaboration here. I'm just pulling out a video from my phone where you see a European speaking like a Nigerian. I don't know if I hope there will be no copyright issue, but just to show you a very brief clip of it. You see this man.
Oh, there's no sound.
Also, copyright issue. I do not want to play it for long, but that, for example, is a Nigerian comedy.
Right. Okay.
It's a Nigerian comedy, and it's being run by a European and a Nigerian. They just play around. The European is proving to the Nigerian that he knows a lot about Nigeria. He is a Nigerian in heart. And so we have, this is just one, we have several others. They make their showbiz here, interacting and displaying that they are just like us in the sense that they are human, right? So we could, if people could understand that there is a group of people, a small group of people that are trying to tear this world apart for their own profit. Using race.
They want it to be hard. That's why, you know, if you look at Persia, we split Persia up into different countries so that they'd fight each other, you know. And if you look at where the lines are, there's a real classic example now with Iran and Afghanistan. Well, Afghanistan has got one of the large water sources that goes into Iran. And Iran saying, we need this water. And Afghani is saying, well, no, it's our water, you know. And actually, if you were splitting a landscape up according to like benefits to people, you would never cut the water source off and make it a point of contention. Do you see what I mean? But we have deliberately gone into different countries, the British, and split countries up so that there's power battles and so that there's hardship. And it's a really cruel thing that we do, but we do it so that there's war, because war means money, and it means that people have less money to live on, which means we can pay them less for their commodities. And like you were saying about slavery, and how slavery doesn't just affect slaves, it also affects people whose labor is worthless then, because slaves exist.
Yeah.
And that's really evident around the world. It's something very deliberate, I think.
Yeah, I believe, because we have just about 6 minutes left. I believe that the solution to all these racial tensions is not to demand uh, compensation for what has happened in the past. It's not to try to have a woke culture of playing black people with white people, playing white people with black people. It's not going to work. It's going to be a case of re-educating people for the present and the future, encouraging people to interact in an open mind on an equal footing, with the mindset of, I want to know about you, not I want to teach you my ways that are superior. I want to know about you. Exactly. I want to know your culture. And then there is that genuine cultural exchange and understanding where people can learn from each other and take the good from this, add to theirs, and everybody is happy. So before you give your last words, I want to say this concerning those who have criticized you, maybe calling you a Putin fan or whatever. The term conspiracy theorist is a CIA coined term. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated in the early 60s or mid 60s, there was a report, the Warren Report of 1967. The Warren Report was to give a very ludicrous story to how Kennedy was assassinated, and it made little sense to the people. And so the Central Intelligence Agency of America coined a derogatory term saying this, anyone that does not agree with the mainstream opinion or the pushed out opinion will be called a conspiracy theorist, to make the person look crazy. And so,
and they've done that. They've used that across the board. Like, I often get asked about 9/11, and I say, do you know what? I don't give it any credence, because how many buildings have blown up in Kabul in the last 20 years, and we don't talk about them constantly. The conspiracy theory becomes the conspiracy. It really does. It takes active minds away from thinking about what the real issues are, and gives them something bizarre to focus on. And then they give you these snippets and X, Y, and Z. We might have to do another video about conspiracy theories.
I just wanted to be clear to people that whenever they use that term against an opinion that, or rather against something they don't understand, they are actually playing to the gallery. They are playing the
100%
the useful idiot to the CIA, because there was this act, the Smith-Mons Act of 1948, that legalized the use of propaganda by the US government on non-Americans around the world. And Barack Obama signed it in 2012, the National Defense Authorization Act, now legalizing the use of propaganda on American soil. And let me tell you this, whatever they tell you they are doing now is what they've been doing decades ago. And so we have to be alert, awake, and stop criticizing, insulting things we don't understand. Even the Bible describes as brute beasts, people that mock what they don't understand. What you don't understand today, you will understand tomorrow. What you look at as a conspiracy theory today will be a conspiracy fact tomorrow. And so what Fiona and several others are doing is waking up society, waking people up, because those that encourage you to have racial tensions, encourage you to hate others for some reason, they are doing it for their own enrichment and for your own impoverishment. So we need to wake up. France is a wealthy country, but how many of its citizens are actually wealthy? And so, Fiona,
Yeah, exactly.
How can you be followed online? What are your platforms so people get to know you?
Well, my TikTok account got banned a couple of days ago, but I've got a new one, and that's diplomacy is free, which you can that's my tagline, you know, because we give all of this money for war when we could just be having a chat, you know what I mean? And everyone's skint now.
I
Also, you can follow me on.
I almost said congratulations. When social media bans your account, it means you are doing something right.
Every 2 months they ban my account. I always come back. I always have the same tagline. It's just what happens. I just see it as part of the process now, and it's a good cult really of people that, you know, aren't willing to come and follow me again.
So what are your platforms?
I've also got a YouTube page called Diplomacy is Free, which you can follow, and I upload all of my videos. So I did like a recording of our last interview. I'll do a recording of this one. I'm going to do a longer video today about Syria, Turkey, and the Erdogan's bizarre decision to release the commanders of Azov back to the Ukrainians last weekend. And that's really, really helpful to have a little bit more time to speak to people. And there you can access my Patreon and my Buy Me a Coffee, which people use if they find my work useful, which obviously supports me to carry on doing what I do. But those are probably my main two, YouTube and TikTok. I spend most of my time on.
Okay, so my viewers, you've heard from her, and I hope you have gained a lot. The world we live in is for all of us. The resources are for all of us. And anyone that encourages hatred is actually doing it for selfish reasons. Because this
it would be
world is
excellent
big
to
enough.
do a video about the African Union and the currency, the new African currency.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I know it's an international currency, but really it's the BRICS currency, isn't it? So it would be good to do a video on that some point in the next week or so.
Okay, I look forward to that. Well, you can also find my channel on various platforms, David Aigbona, on BitChute, on Rumble, on Odyssey.com, YouTube, Gab.com, and Brighton. Our videos will be like this one with Fiona. It's on Rumble and some other platforms I'm on. And so thank you for joining. May the Lord bless you and keep you. God, thank you. Have a nice
God bless. See you soon.